Hi, my name is Stefan, and I'm going to read to you today the story of Silly Little Daddy and a Knife, a story I wrote for my two lovely little girls, Alva and Mila. Once there was a little boy, and this little boy was Silly Little Daddy. Silly Little Daddy was about your age, maybe a little older, and just like you, he wanted to do everything himself. He didn't like listening to Grandma and Grandpa's warning because he thought he was a big, clever boy and could look after himself. He wanted to put butter on his own bread. He wanted to cut his bread into small pieces ready to eat, just like Grandma had always done it for him. His parents only allowed Silly Little Daddy a butter knife. That was not sharp enough to cut anything. Boring! Silly Little Daddy saw that Grandpa and Grandma had different knives. These knives were sharp knives. He wanted to have one of these. It would be so much easier to cut if he had one of them. Not being a shy boy, he asked, "Can I have one like yours?" His parents said no, and that he was still too young to own a sharp knife. Silly Little Daddy was very unhappy with that answer, and he cried and complained. And I guess you know how that goes, right? May have happened around here once or twice too, huh? However, just a few days later, Grandpa had a present for Silly Little Daddy. A brand new knife! And it was not one of the blunt ones he was allowed to have up until then. It had a nice, sharp blade. Silly Little Daddy was so excited. He could not wait to try it out. Silly Little Daddy set out to cut his bread into small pieces. Also some cheese and a sausage. It was great fun. The knife was working really well. Silly Little Daddy got more and more enthusiastic. Soon he was cutting faster and faster, and he paid less and less attention to what he was doing. Grandma warned Silly Little Daddy to be careful with the knife. "If you aren't careful, you will soon cut your fingers instead of your bread." But Silly Little Daddy would not listen. He replied, "No, I won't. I know how to cut. I am a big boy." Finally, there was a big orange tasty carrot. Silly Little Daddy tried to cut it into small pieces too. But the carrot was different. It was tough and a bit flexible, and it clung to the blade of his knife. So he pulled as hard as he could and slash! The knife cut through the carrot and straight into Silly Little Daddy's finger. "Ow! Ow!" he cried out. Silly Little Daddy made a really big fuss about the cut. It hurt! Tears were rolling down his face. His finger was bleeding. So he stuck the finger into his mouth, but it still hurt. Grandma hugged him, nodded, and said that was why she had warned Silly Little Daddy. With a sharp knife, these things can happen. It was part of life, learning things, and it would happen again. As you can imagine, Silly Little Daddy really did not like to hear that. But then she put a band-aid over the bleeding finger, and it soon stopped hurting. A few days later, the band-aid came off and, lo and behold, Silly Little Daddy's finger had healed again. To his big delight, Grandma and Grandpa allowed him to keep the knife. And from then on, he was much more careful when cutting with a sharp knife, and it was a long, long time before he cut his finger again. And that's the story of Silly Little Daddy and a Knife. I hope you like it, and I'm looking forward to the next time you tune in to listen to another one. Till then, bye bye.